Evolution, a deliberate yet subliminal process for all but humankind. We cannot wait.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for man.
He's on the move.
Coming up, the world-famous Royal Albert Hall in London is undergoing a massive refurbishment that could see it double in size. It's hoped the multi-million-pound works will be completed by the year 2003, making the whole venue more customer and artist-friendly. And wildfires are responsible for the destruction of many thousands of hectares of forest. So why are crews from the Los Angeles County Fire Department actually setting this area of the San Gabriel Mountains ablaze? Personal mementos and art treasures belonging to the great British actor Sir John Gielgud raised more than £1 million for charity when they were sold at London auction house Sotheby's. And still on the stage, the world's longest-running play, Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap, celebrated 50 years on the London stage at an all-star party. And we'll be looking at the disaster site of the World Trade Center. The Duke of York was the first member of the British royal family to visit Ground Zero. The high-profile visit was seen as a very real show of public support to New York and its citizens. Perseus is made specifically for high-altitude studies. This remote-control glider has a deceptively simple design. Its thin, wispy wings and large 15-foot propeller are made of strong, ultralight composite materials. Much of the design work that made Perseus possible grew out of a human-powered flight project at MIT called Daedalus. These are just some of the weapons handed into a central location in Pets, Western Kosovo, during the weapons amnesty of 1999. But in the Balkans, weapons seem to replace themselves as quickly as they are removed from circulation. British KFOR soldiers are patrolling the Kosovo-Macedonia border to stop arms trafficking in both directions. But despite changes in the law to control guns in Kosovo, KFOR street patrols making spot searches of cars are still confiscating large numbers of illegal weapons. Guns are being used to commit armed crime and are too easily reached for in domestic arguments, many of which end in fatalities. The local police commissioner says it's time for people to have the courage to surrender their weapons. People can either bring the arms in or they can leave weapons at designated places and there'll be no penalty or investigation. The Commissioner says that work on making Kosovo a safer place to live can begin by making weapons an unusual rather than a commonplace element in society. The world-famous Royal Albert Hall in London is undergoing a massive development that could see it double in size. It's one of England's most famous and admired landmarks, a cultural centre which hosts some of the top performers from around the world. But now the Royal Albert Hall is undergoing a multi-million-pound refit that will make it bigger and more customer-friendly. The work has restored some of the Victorian splendour of the original. The hall is famous for concerts, including the Proms, one of Britain's most traditional and popular annual events. The £63 million refurbishment fund will see the building outside and underneath the auditorium almost double in size. A 3-floored basement will be excavated to the south. Concert goers will be cooled by a new air conditioning system, be able to walk along wider corridors and visit numerous new restaurants and coffee bars. And customers are already noticing and welcoming the improvements. Money will also be spent on restoring the 150-ton organ and adding pipes to make it the largest instrument of its kind in Britain. But visitors be warned. The Royal Albert Hall is said to be haunted. On many occasions, people have described seeing ghosts. Henry Willis, who built the organ, is said to haunt the vaults, while well-dressed Victorian girls have been seen in the basement before disappearing through the walls.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Every year, thousands of acres of Southern California forests are wiped out by wildfires. That's why it was so surprising to see crews from the Los Angeles County Fire Department actually setting a blaze in the San Gabriel Mountains. Using a ground-based device called a TerraTorch and a helitorch dropping gelid gasoline from above, almost 1,000 acres of chaparral forest were ignited. The goal was to prevent a larger, potentially catastrophic wildfire in this area of heavy, dead vegetation. But the control burn also served another purpose. It gave numerous scientific groups an opportunity to study the impact of fires on our environment. A primary concern is the effect of large-scale burning on our atmosphere. Evidence points to the fact that gases are building up and the environment is changing. Burning off biomass, forest vegetation, shrubs and grass is a very important source of a number of these gases that have important environmental impact. One significant gas produced by burning vegetation is carbon dioxide. Computer models suggest that if the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is doubled, the average temperature of the Earth will go up 3 to 4 degrees. The result could be extensive melting of the North and South poles, causing widespread flooding around the coastal areas in the world. Agricultural growing patterns could also be dramatically changed. Crops now harvested in the central US, for example, might only grow in Canada. To determine how much carbon dioxide and other so-called greenhouse gases were coming off the burn, a researcher working aboard a helicopter flew through the smoke plume collecting samples. These samples were then analysed at NASA's Langley Research Center. Looking at natural fires from a different angle, 65,000 feet above, is another group of scientists at the Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California. The key to their effort is a U-2 high-altitude aircraft equipped with a sophisticated picture-taking device called a multispectral scanner. From imagery generated by the airborne scanner during the fire, significant characteristics of the blaze can be determined, such as temperatures and the dynamics of the smoke plume. Langley's data is used as the basic information. Then the information from the Ames remotely sensed data is overlaid on top of that in the hope that we can predict, not only on a local basis, but from a regional and global basis, what impact large-scale burning is having on our environment. sale of the contents of the home of Sir John Gielgud raised more than £1 million for the late British actor's favourite charities. Watching over the sale proceedings was a bronze bust of the late actor playing Hamlet. It sold for £14,300, more than 14 times the estimated price. It was just one relic of an acting career that spanned nearly 80 years, from 1921 until Sir John's death in 2000 at the age of 96. Personal memorabilia included the actor's Panama hat, gloves and cigarette case, which sold for £1,800, more than 3 times their expected price. All 600 lots in the sale comprise the contents of Sir John Gielgud's home, South Pavilion in Buckinghamshire, west of London. They were the possessions of a man of impeccable taste, reflected in his choice of paintings, antique furniture, brass, silver and carpets. Even when at home, he was living within things that were like theatre props. They surrounded him and offset him, but they also gave him pleasure and security. He wanted to be surrounded by objects of beauty and also order. Amongst the silverware, a tiny director's chair recalled a Somerset Maugham play directed by Sir John in 1975. It failed to sell, as did a 16th century model of a theatre set depicting a rehearsal of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale at the Globe Theatre. The actor's collection of pocket editions of Shakespeare's works, however, sold for £21,200, 6 times the estimated price, while his 1930 edition of Hamlet, bequeathed to him by fellow actor Laurence Olivier, fetched a remarkable £23,500. Letters from Buckingham Palace relating to Sir John's knighthood. The whole collection is a fitting tribute to one of the greatest theatrical figures of the 20th century. The Mousetrap opened in 1952. Since then, it's become something of a national institution. It's been translated into more than 20 languages, performed in 40 countries, and an estimated 10 million people have seen it. In the fickle world of show business, where a production can fold overnight, the play's success has confounded many of its critics. Each year, the cast is changed, and today's leading actors in the show are enthusiastic about the production. So why is it so successful? Sir Richard Attenborough says that it's brilliantly written. When they were on tour, he said they got to write new scenes, but the second they came to London, all the original dialogue had to be returned. In the fickle world of show business, where a production can fold overnight, the play's success has confounded many of its critics. The play remains a major production in London's West End, and it still manages to keep one of the theatre's best-kept secrets. Who done it? The only answer is to see it for yourself.
Don't you?
Day 34 at the centre of the remains of the World Trade Complex. Ground Zero was still smoking, still dirty, and still dangerous. It's believed that thousands of bodies remain here more than a month after the terrorist attacks. This was the difficult scene greeting Britain's Duke of York. He wanted to show his support and that of the British public in the most obvious way. A demanding task in a place of utter destruction and desolation. Workers here are putting in 16-hour shifts a day to clear the rubble. It's expected to continue for another year. Prince Andrew spoke to many of them, and they reported his visit to be very meaningful and very powerful, to have him at the site showing his support and appreciation for what's happened and what they're continuing to work through. Earlier, Prince Andrew had an easier task, confirming the honorary knighthood from his mother, the Queen, to Mayor Giuliani. He said Britain's support was a source of strength to New Yorkers. Britain's support was again evident on the streets of New York when the pipes and drums of the Scots Guards opened a ceremony at the Rockefeller Center. The reopening of the famous ice rink to the public was a practical example of life returning to normal. And for Prince Andrew, it was an opportunity to share his personal thoughts on the events of September 11. He said at the time he was on a plane flying to the United States, and his former wife had her office in the World Trade Center on the 101st floor. He, like many others, didn't know if she was safe. He and his wife knew many of those who were in the World Trade Center at the time, and both he and she pray regularly for those who'd lost their loved ones in this barbaric act. And then very quickly, New York turned on its own style and showed its determination to succeed. Our next story takes us to the upper reaches of the atmosphere. In its effort to learn more about our homeworld, NASA has launched a variety of experiments using scientific balloons, sounding rockets, high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, and one of the fastest planes in the sky. Scientists are now looking at a new generation of inexpensive aircraft made specifically for high-altitude studies. Called Perseus, it's shown here in a hangar at NASA's Flight Research Center in California. This remote control glider has a deceptively simple design. Its thin, wispy wings and large 15-foot prop are made of strong, ultralight composite materials. The plane carries oxygen tanks to help fuel its gas-powered engine when climbing into the upper reaches of the atmosphere. It has the ability to fly twice as high as a commercial jetliner. Conceived by Aurora Flight Sciences in Manassas, Virginia, Perseus can carry 110 pounds of science payload. NASA hopes to eventually commission a fleet of inexpensive global watches that can be launched anywhere in the world. The science community is generally regarded as a poor community, so vehicles like these are designed to allow a cost-effective way of retrieving the type of detailed information space scientists require, but often can't afford. And there are several distinct advantages in keeping the pilot on the ground while a computer adjusts the flight controls. It's not only much safer, but allows for far more equipment to be carried aloft. Perseus-like aircraft may enhance important studies of Earth's protective ozone shield over the North and South poles, both very hostile environments. Manned flights over these areas can be very dangerous due to the cold temperatures and the inability to glide home from Antarctica in an engine-out situation. Remotely controlled vehicles are under far less constraints than when a pilot is in the cockpit. This also allows the team to take some calculated risks and often greatly reduce development time. A single software change to a manned aircraft could halt flight operations for months, but Perseus could be in the air the very next day. Minor mechanical changes can also be made in a matter of hours, as nobody's life is put at risk. Much of the design work that made Perseus possible grew out of a human-powered flight project at MIT called Daedalus. In 1988, this 69-pound craft flew a distance of 72 miles between the Greek islands of Crete and Santorini. The ultralight, long, flexible wings were able to keep the plane aloft at low speeds, breaking new ground in aerodynamics. Building on their success, several members of the MIT team branched out to form Aurora. In creating Perseus, they borrowed from the shape and design of the Daedalus wings. Greg Zak was one of 5 cyclist pilots on the Daedalus project. Capitalizing on his skill in flying gliders and remotely controlled model airplanes, Zak has gone on to pilot Perseus. Aurora uses an open stretch of dry desert lakebed for flight testing. When all systems are set, the truck accelerates, gently lifting Perseus into the air like a kite on a string. At 700 feet, the tow line is released and the ground team engages the propeller. Perseus is free. During flight operations, Zak communicates with another pilot, Frank Stanley, who sits at a duplicate flight control inside the ground station. Zak must keep the plane in sight during takeoffs and landings. Once airborne, Frank can take over Perseus's control. Martin Gomez and Tom Clancy helped Stanley with the engineering of the plane and keep communication ties with the NASA tower and launch team at the lakebed. Eventually, flight testing will reach altitudes of 80 to 90,000 feet, where vital atmospheric research can begin. Both the slow speed of the craft and the ability for the payload to be in the nose make it ideal for this type of work. Scientists argue that to positively determine the effects of ozone depletion by man-made chemicals or aircraft exhaust, instruments need to fly slowly through specific areas of the upper atmosphere. Perseus will attempt to fly higher than any propeller-driven, remotely controlled aircraft. A tremendous technical leap forward. The end result of all this time and effort will be a better understanding of the Earth's atmosphere. And that's something that gives the team a great sense of pride. Perseus, NASA's global watcher, the first in a family of low-cost aeroplanes designed to further our understanding of the world we live in.